gonna be humming, out of plenty a coming. Won't be shedding no tears 10 years from now. Holding on to my cash, it could go in a flash.
1945. The Second World War is coming to an end. In all the cinemas of the United States, people sing, "Buy war bonds today, in 10 years you'll be rich." It took barely 10 years for a much greater number of much smaller screens to invade the heart of every American home. Fred MacDonald, historian and collector, will guide us through these images which were meant to lead the way to peace, but which very soon took the paths to war.
Anyway, my name is Fred MacDonald. I am a professor of history at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. I am also the curator of the Museum of Broadcast Communications, which is a new museum dedicated to radio and television broadcasting as a public institution for research and for public enjoyment of the history of American commercial broadcasting. I have written 4 books on the history of radio and television, 1 on the history of radio broadcasting and 3 on the history of television, the most recent being Who Shot the Sheriff? The Rise and Fall of the Television Western.
Death from the sky, from a bomb fired by an enemy thousands of miles away. The bomb which could be the opening of World War III. It is to prevent the firing of such a bomb that we of the United Nations have struggled on the Italian front, the Western front, the Eastern front, throughout the Balkans, halfway around the world, in China, in Burma, in the Atlantic, up and down the Pacific, wherever the enemy can be brought to bay, to make possible a peace more permanent than a breathing spell between devastating wars. So, as the war reaches its final stages and the sight of victory comes near, let us look into the future and visualize how this proposed plan would work. Here is one of the many buildings in which tomorrow the General Assembly of the United Nations will be waging not war but peace. Entering will be representatives of all the nations dedicated to peace, large and small, meeting together in sovereign equality. These men and women will be charged by their countries with the job of charting a course that will improve economic and social conditions and lessen the injustices and the frictions that have been responsible for wars. This is not the capital of some super-state trying to rule the earth. It represents the mind and conscience of the world. It is the watchtower over tomorrow.
The March of Time.
If we could find a date which the Cold War begins, some say, oh, the Russian reluctance to withdraw their troops from Iran in 1946 when the United Nations said they should. Others have said that indeed it really begins with the Berlin airlift in 1948, or with the Truman Doctrine in 1947 and the Marshall Plan, which quickly followed reactions to the civil war in Greece.
In many a U.S. home, conversations in recent years have been taking an abrupt turn to a topic of importance to all Americans.
Well, that's Cologne. It got blitzed worse than Frankfurt.
Who's this?
Well, that's us in Berlin with some Russians. This one is Dmitry Andreev. He's a sergeant in charge of a detail.
Russians. We should have cracked down on those bums at the end of the war.
I can't understand what this fuss with the Russians is all about. Ones I met were good guys. We worked together all right.
Today, millions of Americans are preoccupied with the shift of events abroad in post-war years, which has turned many of them from admiration of Russia as a wartime ally to profound moral disapproval and fear of it as an ambitious and predatory rival power.
Everywhere I have been in the world, in Europe, in Asia, one thing is clear. The Soviet Union has proved again and again that it cannot be trusted. while Russia continues her aggressive attitude toward free nations, world peace, your peace and mine, will hang very precariously in the balance.
How do you take a people with a deep tradition of isolationism and turn them into rabid interventionists so quickly? I argue in the book that it is primarily through television that happens. And not only through television, but through programming and through networks and through other types of arrangements which exclude a point of view that would challenge the major mentality being manipulated or being foisted upon the masses of the American people.
Hiya, Charlie.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, how much oil are you?
75 to 85 cents.
85 cents. Better save your pennies, buddy. We're headed for a crash that's going to tear this country wide apart.
Ha! Communist.
Let the ruling classes tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries, unite.
This is one of the greatest myths of all. The fact is that those who join the communists have nothing to win but totalitarian chains. Marx dreamed of the establishment of workers' governments after the workers formed a majority of the population. This was the core of Marx's dictatorship of the proletariat.
At the 1903 Congress of Russian Social Democrats, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin twisted Marxist theory to suit his own conditions. Lenin proposed that a small group of professional revolutionaries impose its leadership upon the workers and upon the great majority of the country. The Democratic group at the Congress at first defeated Lenin. Then Lenin followed his characteristic principle: the end justifies the means. By manipulation, pressure, bullying, and other means, Lenin caused a small number of delegates to withdraw from the Congress. This transformed his minority group to a majority, a Bolshinstvo, giving the party its name, Bolshevik.
Mr. Stalin?
Who are you? Who let you in here?
Oh, don't you remember? I arranged to interview you.
Oh, get out. I've changed my mind.
But you agreed to have...
Agreements are made to be broken.
As one program, of course, it's not effective. But as part of the plethora, as part of the overriding inundation of these kinds of points of view, it represents kind of an extreme, an exaggerated extreme of it. But it does embody the stereotyped image of what Stalin was like, a stereotypic picture of Lenin and and Karl Marx, and as such, then it meshes with what existed, and if anything else, accentuates the
Some of them thought they were
counter position relative to communism.
They were all enemies of the party.
Mr. Stalin, you have been called the greatest mass murderer in history. Do you refute that?
Well, why should I? There was no other way.
Well, do you have any idea of how many people you killed?
Idea? I recorded it in my own handwriting. I eliminated most of the old line military leaders, shot for treason 70% of my Central Committee, purified by death hundreds of our diplomats. I want absolute power.
This basic objective of total power accounts for the ruthless and thorough way in which the communists have traditionally seized power. Take next some instruments which often give the communists a certain advantage over non-communists. First, organization. It is a misnomer to think of the Communist Party as a political party in our sense. Actually, it is organized along military lines and designed to operate at both legal and illegal levels. It exacts unquestioning obedience from its entire membership, demanding 24-hour-a-day duty from its trained hardcore, expecting its followers to use force if necessary. Thus, the communists have an organization. The communist creed calls for hatred, preaching the doctrine of undying hostility between communists and non-communists. It calls for destruction, denying the possibility of reforming existing institutions and insisting instead that these institutions be completely scrapped as unsound. It calls for violence, justifying the use of force, intimidation, and terrorism in the name of an allegedly greater good. The writers, artists, composers, dancers, they, of course, are a special target. The communists are eager to secure the appeal of their talents and the respectability of their names in support of the party's program. If the artists refused to cooperate, they found themselves completely barred from their public. And so the professional groups...
Today on American television, it is possible to see Daniel Ortega live from Managua. While the American government is trying to overthrow his government, he's live on American television saying how, this shouldn't be done. We get left and right, we get anti-communist and anti-anti-communist points of view. That balance was never there in the 1950s.
I think it's very striking. I just want to make that point, but you speak of anti-communist and anti-communist, but never of communist.
I mean, right. True. Well, communists, right. No, right. That's an excellent point. Communists don't have much chance in American culture.
Yes.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist. If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist.
Oh, sacred heart, for love divine, to keep us near to thee. Heart of Jesus, hear, O heart of love divine.
Peace be to this home and all who dwell therein. O Jesus, through the Immaculate Heart of Mary, I offer thee my prayers, works, joys, and sufferings of this day for all the...
There never was an open argument. There never was an argument in the 1950s and early 60s on American television because the right had captured American popular culture.
For all the intentions of thy Sacred Heart, in union with the holy sacrifice of the Mass throughout the world, in reparation for my sins, for the intentions of all our associates.
Attention, all those who are in the streets. Run for the nearest shelter, but run as close to the walls of buildings as possible. Stop your car. Get out of your cars immediately and run for the nearest shelter. out of that car. It's dangerous. Get out from the middle of the street. While you're running, keep close to the buildings.
I think fear was an integral part of the Cold War to American citizens, the average person. With ignorance, with not knowing what would happen next, with images of the enemy ready to strike any minute, the people in the United States became fearful.
There'll be an intense flash of light, and when you see that light, forget all about shelters and preparations. Just don't look at that light. Cover your eyes with your elbows like this, and then dive for cover.
There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and Bert the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered, ducked and covered.
He did what we all must learn to do. You
and you
and you and you.
duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover. This is an official civil defense film produced in cooperation with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and in consultation with the Safety Commission of the National Education Association. Here's Tony going to his Cub Scout meeting. Tony knows the bomb can explode any time. Duck and cover. Atta boy, Tony. That flash means act fast. Tony knows that it helps to get to any kind of cover. This wall was close by, so that's where he ducked and covered. Tony knew what to do. Notice how he keeps from moving or from getting up and running? He stays down until he is sure the danger is over. The man helping Tony is a civil defense worker. His job is to help protect us when there is danger of the atomic bomb. We must obey the civil defense worker. We must know how to duck and cover in the school bus or in any other bus or streetcar. Duck and cover. Don't wait. Duck away from the windows fast. The glass may break and fly through the air and cut you. Sundays, holidays, vacation time, we must be ready every day, all the time, to do the right thing if the atomic bomb explodes. Duck and cover. This family knows what to do, just as your own family should. They know that even a thin cloth helps protect them. Even a newspaper can save you from a bad burn. But the most important thing of all is to duck and cover yourself, especially where your clothes do not cover you. No matter where we live, in the city or the country, we must be ready all the time for the atomic bomb. Duck and cover. That's the first thing to do, duck and cover. The next important thing to do after that is to stay covered until the danger is over.
Remember what to do, friends. Now tell me right out loud. What are you supposed to do when you see the flash?
Duck and cover. Duck and cover.
Truman said, how are we going to get the American people, after all these decades, centuries of isolationism, of non-involvement, of not wanting to become engaged in world politics, how are we going to get the American people to agree to this kind of a politic? And Senator Vandenberg is reported to have said, you'll have to scare the hell out of them.
You know, a lot of people behind the Iron Curtain are wondering whether we can take it if we're attacked. They're carefully measuring our courage, our capacity to fight, our capacity for sacrifice. They think they have the answers. Well, you and I and every American has to examine their minds and hearts and come up with a few answers of their own. The question is, have Americans got the guts? Have you got the guts?
And the Red Scare, the Red Paranoia, becomes increased by the early 1950s. And that's when you start to get the science fiction films particularly, which exploit this fear of the unknown, fear of the different, fear of invasion.
The Lone Ranger.
The Lone Ranger is the story of the thrilling days of yesteryear. The Lone Ranger gives you the man on horseback who rides out of nowhere into the town, solves the problems of the town, and rides off.
Hearty Hi-Yo Silver, the Lone Ranger. Hi-Yo Silver, away! With his faithful Indian companion Tonto, the daring and resourceful masked rider of the plains led the fight for law and order in the early West. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. The Lone Ranger rides again.
And I think the attitudes of most Americans found in the Western justification and a strengthening of the resolve to withstand the Red threat.
Your assignment, danger. Your mission, find the master spy. Your weapon, Secret Sam. Through Secret Sam's periscope, you see him, but he can't see you. You locate the master spy, you talk to him, and Secret Sam's hidden camera is taking his picture right now. Suddenly you're discovered. Secret Sam fires bullets from inside the case. Secret Sam has barrel extension. Special missile sends message to your partner. Mission accomplished. You hand over real photograph. Secret Sam with periscope, message missile, rifle stock, barrel extension, even shoots through this carrying case. And this real camera that works in secretly or out. Takes real photos. Secret Sam. Secret Sam.
The spy is an integral part of Cold War entertainment at exactly the time the Cold War, to a degree, has become a hot war in Vietnam.
American forces in Vietnam know that the communists' so-called War of Liberation is no less a form of aggression than was the conventional attack in Korea. And they know that this new form of aggression must be defeated and proven unprofitable, or the communists will be encouraged to try it elsewhere with greater confidence and resources. So the war goes on. Clearly, it is the communists who have made that choice. And as always, the innocent suffer.
Why Vietnam is a government film that was not shown on television. But these films are shown in clubs and groups, Kiwanis Club, local business clubs, local parent-teacher organizations. Any kind of social group that wants to show these films can have them on loan for nothing.
I'm Chet Huntley. To most of us, this is the United States Navy. The aircraft carrier, the cruiser, and destroyer. The modern deep-water Navy, extending American strength across the oceans of the world. But in Vietnam, the American Navy has done an unprecedented variety of different jobs. It has held command responsibility for all support activities. With the Army, it has been advisor to the South Vietnamese and has sent the Marines to help fight the land war. With the Air Force, it flies the planes which provide air power. And with civilian agencies, it pursues a vigorous program of civic action. These are the all-around capabilities demonstrated by a modern, versatile naval force in action.
But in these films, like the American Navy in Vietnam, and others, we find Chet Huntley, for instance, who in the 1960s was the leading newsman on American television in terms of viewer ratings. And here he is narrating on camera an obviously propagandistic hosanna to the role that the United States Navy is playing in Vietnam. It is a film clearly meant to show you, or to make you think, that the United States Navy is doing a fantastic job in fighting communists in Southeast Asia.
Why do we fight the war, Daddy?
Call toll-free and start putting the Vietnam experience into focus with Combat Photographer. You'll see what it was like over there from a perspective the media couldn't provide, an historic perspective that only now are we able to consider. It is important that we honor and remember those who gave their lives for our country. But honoring isn't enough. Remembering isn't enough. We must answer the question, what's Vietnam? For ourselves and for the next generation.
Will I have to fight in a war, Daddy?
American television is American business. American television is not government-run. It is there to make money. It is corporate-run, and it has all the kind of linkages to corporate structure that any other business would have in the United States.